Hi, my name is Eliana Van Vleck, and this is our learning experience project. To start with the case study, our motor skill that we chose was dribbling a basketball. The instructional setting is in a sports performance center, which offers basketball private lessons, or specifically the rec center. Our learner's main goal is to improve performance of dribbling in a game setting to be a good recreational player. Our learner just joined an intramural basketball team and wants to be able to participate in game settings just by being able to dribble more efficiently. So our skill classification, we chose continuous just because when dribbling a basketball down a court, there's not a stopping or a starting point. And then there is body transportation and object manipulation, the object being the ball, and then body transportation being dribbling, either walking or running, not just staying in place, just because that's not relevant for a game setting. And then the end goal for our participant is that the skill should successfully be performed in an open environment, which is the recreational game setting. So our skill uses a lot of reliance on closed loop control. The difference between open and closed loop is that open loop, there's generally no time for error correction. So when you're participating in a skill, you just kind of go through it and there's not really a time for you to stop and make corrections. But with closed loop, the loop is closed, so you're able to create the error corrections, and then for the next time you get to implement that. So we chose closed loop as being beneficial, just because we have an open environment and continuous skill. And it's an unpredictable environment. So the application is when you're dribbling a basketball in a game setting, it's very unpredictable, and there's lots of time where you're going to need to correct errors. And it allows time for error detection and correction, therefore closing the loop. So if an opposing player makes an unexpected move, there's feedback allowed, which is important to gauge how to respond efficiently. And you don't just keep doing the same moves and then they're able to read what you're going to do next. So we placed our learner in the associative stage of learning. We said this because the learner has some past experience with dribbling, which is why we didn't choose the cognitive stage, just because they have prior, but not in a game setting. And for our learner, the skill does require a lot of concentration, meaning he's not able to keep his eyes up very well, just kind of focuses on dribbling the ball, and there are a lot of errors present. So the performance indicators that our learner is showing is they are somewhat able to detect when they are wrong, but are still committing errors. And then the consistency isn't necessarily there, which is what we really want to improve. Just for game settings, when you're dribbling down the court, it would be a lot easier. And then movement coordination as well. So for verbal instruction and demonstration, I'm just going to define each of those. So verbal instruction is really important when teaching a skill because it makes the learner aware of a major critical elements of the skill. Necessarily things, if you're just demonstrating it, it'd be harder to have the learner understand some aspects of it, which is why it's important to use verbal instructions, because there are some things that they may miss by just watching the demonstration. Helps the learner focus on particular details. And then the demonstration allows the learner to kind of connect the words to the actual skill and kind of see what it's supposed to look like, so that way they can kind of take that and understand what they're supposed to do. And then, the learner is able to see how the movement pattern should look.
Of our verbal instruction and demonstration. Beginning demonstration, looking at what we decided that the entire skill should be demonstrated so they can get a full view of it. For who, an expert should be the one showing it. That way they can see what the movement pattern should look like in its entirety. For how, we kind of decided to go with a multi-angled approach. So the first learner is standing in front of the expert while they show it, and then they do the same thing on the side so you can get it from a few different angles. When it should be demonstrated before the learner even starts. That way they can see what the movement pattern should look like before they get going. And how often, since our learner is a little experienced, they have done it before, um, we decided that it should be demonstrated in the beginning and then really only again if there's errors. For verbal instruction, for amount of information, it should be short verbal cues. That way, our learner isn't overloaded. So, this could be something like keep your eyes up, which is only a few words long rather than a whole sentence. And for focus of attention, this is things like focusing on specific types of skills, like correct dribbling technique, keeping your eyes up, and a few other things that we really focus on in our upcoming video. We also use things like prescriptive and descriptive feedback, and really having that kind of positive reinforcement in there as well. And so here is our video.
Here is our video for verbal instruction and demonstration for dribbling.
Hi guys, so we're going to be refining Z's movement of dribbling on the move. So I'm going to just demonstrate first and then he's just going to observe and we'll kind of refine some of the skills.
First, Kiana, who is our expert, will demonstrate the entire skill from the front and from the side.
So I'm going to show Z how it's performed from a front angle and then a side angle. Alright Z, so you're going to do the exact same movement as I was doing. You'll just kind of, same thing, dribble, run, and just be aware of some of the mistakes that you maybe not will make, and then afterwards I'll just give you some feedback.
Next, Kiana will give augmented feedback by asking what Z thinks he did wrong and summarizing his errors. She then gives short verbal cues using both descriptive and prescriptive feedback, focusing on knowledge of performance and telling Z to focus his attention on specific parts of the skill.
Okay, what do you think you did wrong?
I kept my eyes down on the floor. Also had the ball in front of me the entire time.
Okay.
This bathroom was hot.
Yeah. So again, you had the ball right in front of you, and also you were keeping your eyes down. So we want to keep our eyes up so we can see the entirety of the court and see like where your defenders, where your teammates may possibly be, and where the hoop is. And then to your with the ball to your side, you need to keep it there because if you dribble in front, the defender is going to be easily able to steal. So just remember, we're going to keep it to the side. So you're going to perform that skill again, keeping those things aware. And then I'll just kind of shout some cues of like, oh, keep your eyes up, keep the ball to your side if there's any mistake. But again, okay. Eyes up.
Last, Kiana uses positive reinforcement to help keep Z motivated.
So really good job. You were able to keep your eyes up, keeping the ball to your side. So keep that up. We'll practice a few more drills with that. So keep everything in mind that you learned, and we'll just keep on practicing that as we go.
Alrighty. So in this portion of the project, we can conclude that when learning a motor skill in a formal training environment, information can be presented as verbal instructions, visual instructions, and or a combination of both. And for our article, we had used the effects of verbal, visual, and combined instructions on learning a sport skill and effective instruction approach in adolescent sports performance. And for the objective of this article itself was to investigate the effect of verbal, visual, and combined instructions on learning the simple forehand service skill of table tennis. And from there, we can look at the graph and based upon what had the results of the findings in this article, it depicts visual instructions and verbal instructions and the combined instruction for the pretest. And then we move on to the first session through the fourth session. And from the post test, we can see that the combined instruction had a higher score on the post test and retention test and transfer test. Then from there, they built their conclusion on combining verbal cues with visual models facilitates the the encoding process of skills and enhances performance during retention and transfer phases, which we showed in our video. Next, for the explanation of augmented feedback, so we have 4 different types. First one is going to be our descriptive feedback, which is describing the nature of the performance error. Then we have prescriptive, which is offering suggestions on how to correct the problem itself. Then reinforcement, which is focusing on correct form rather than the performance itself. And error feedback, giving feedback, well, self-explanatory, giving feedback on errors happening within that skill. And for ours, we use mostly knowledge of performance when it came to correcting errors in that skill. For example, during the video, it was mentioned to keep your eyes up when dribbling, as to confirm what was needed to be done during that skill.
Alrighty, so moving on to augmented feedback with implementing it to our plan and practice. So we implemented it after every attempt that was made. So some strategies that we used to reduce feedback frequency was corrective feedback, so asking the learner what they think they did wrong. So me asking Z after his first attempt what he did wrong, and then him realizing what he's needing to do. Summary feedback, giving feedback after completing the demonstration. So me giving feedback after I was done, and then the same with Z. And then self-control feedback, asking the learner when they wanted to receive feedback. So we asked Z prior to recording when he wanted to receive feedback, so we can add that to our plan of practice. Moving on to our evidence-based practice, we look at the article of effects of feedback type and modality on motor skill learning and retention by Zhu and his colleagues in 2020. So this study focused on the motor skill on a computer-based fits task, so moving a cursor to a target quickly and accurately to test feedback effectiveness. So to the left are some of the research questions that they want answered. And then the main results or finding was that knowledge of performance is better for test performance retention. And we can see some evidence with these graphs below. So for the miss rate during retention, we can see that KP was greater and better overall compared to knowledge of results and the combination of both. And then the same with total movement time during retention in seconds. Knowledge of performance had less amount of time compared to knowledge of results, and which kind of helps relate to knowledge of performance being better. And then how this article relates to our plan of practice. So we want a comprehensive retention of the overall skill. So knowing the exact components that are needed for the skill and knowing what he did wrong and how to fix it. And then learning the nature of the movement skill, kind of closely related. We wanted to show in the different components of how to overall better the skill. So dribbling the ball to the side and having his eyes up, and also kind of showing the importance and why he needed to do those certain things, like keeping the eyes up to see the entirety of the court, and then keeping the ball to the side and dribbling it there to prevent, a defender stealing it. And then we wanted to focus on refinement. So Z already had prior experience, or our learner had prior experience with dribbling in basketball. So just refining those few components to help him better his skill overall. And finally, our references, and that's it. Thank you so much for listening and watching.